right, so marketing is increasingly a challenging space. Marketing is so core to being able to rise above the noise of so many startups bringing new products to market in a world where there are more and more marketing channels. There's more options to reach your customer through both mass and also very specific ways. And also there's a lot more scrutiny on how marketing is working in terms of budget and understanding what's the right place to put your budget. So we're going to talk through some of these issues. I'd like to introduce our panelists. First, we have Sean Regan, Head of Product Marketing at ATLASSIAN. He had previously been at Symantec and also IamLogic. We have Robson Grieves, CMO of New Relic. He had also been SVP of Marketing and CMO at Citrix, and prior to that at Concur Technologies. We have Folia Grace, VP of Marketing for TALKDESK. She had also been before at Anaplan and also for many years at Oracle and SuccessFactors. And we have Gabriele Famous, CMO of ACONEX, which is a company in Australia creating project management software for the construction industry, which operates globally. Previously VP of Product Marketing at Zendesk, and also many years at Salesforce. So with that, we're going to start with the first question, which is, a lot of people think they are marketers, including the CEO and many of your colleagues. So how do you think about dealing with the many opinions that come to you as the head of marketing, given everyone likes to be an armchair marketer?
So I owned an ad agency for a lot of years, and what I learned in that period was that clients generally spoke in terms of ideas. So rarely could they tell you what their strategy or their thought process was behind what they wanted, but they could say what they wanted. And that, I think, makes that relationship where your CEO or a founder or any senior executive to come up with an idea and say, hey, I want what they're really saying is, I have a problem, and I think my solution for it is to do this. And so, to me, I think you got to really encourage those channels and get people to talk in terms of how they think of ideas and make it an open line of communication.
I agree with that. I think good ideas come from everywhere. Just yesterday, I walked the floor, talked to the SDRs at our company. I got a great idea. So I like ideas. I don't necessarily execute on all of them, and I ground it in kind of experience I've had or data we have about what's working. But the more ideas, the better.
What happens when you have a request from like the CEO who may want to see execution or wants you to put resources behind something you don't believe in?
I'm very data-driven CEOs and companies I've worked at, and so I apply the same measures they expect of me back on them. So we've coined a term for this. It's called magic documents for the sales team, or kind of magic ideas from the CEO. And you turn back and you say, where does that fit in the buyer journey? How does that connect to the metrics that we're trying to drive? And a lot of times there are ideas that haven't taken that second step of thinking, and that's where you can reassess whether they make sense.
I agree. I think data is your friend. And, sometimes it's a great idea and we should do it. Absolutely. And maybe it's a stretch. Other times it's not such a good idea, and you can take a look at data you're collecting and where it fits in the buyer's journey and have those discussions.
I think the other point for the conversation as well is what is the impact to the customer experience? So when you think about kind of those balances and those trade-offs, between your resources and your limitations and what you do want to do, how does it impact whether it's a prospect or a current customer and that experience with your brand and that long-term impact? That's a part of the conversation that I always try to bring in so that you can balance the data with that experience to make the right decisions, because all ideas, are great, but what can you really execute on?
Yeah, I think one thought to add on that, because I know there's a number of founders and CEOs in the room. This is actually keys in on one of the really most important things you can do in your marketing hire, which is hire somebody you're willing to hear no from. And that's, I think that's just a really important thing, that you can go looking for someone you can have a really strong dialogue with, who is can be a trusted advisor, and at times can say, hey, listen, I know you think that's a great idea, but here's why we can't do it.
Yeah, in the previous sales panel, Gene from Stripe was saying a lot of people want to be in sales who don't have sales skills. How do you think about building a great marketing team, right? Like, what is the profile you hire for? How do you feel someone's going to be an excellent performer when it might be partly judgment and science and just kind of their view of the world?
I look for scrappiness and raw intelligence, and also a combination of creativity and quantitative skills. I mean, it depends on the role. Marketing is very broad these days, so it's going to be a little bit more quantitative if you're running marketing operations and a little more creative if you're doing demand gen. But I think everybody needs to think about what's the value that we're driving.
I'll throw just a practical one in, maybe an interview tip as you're looking, maybe less so for the founder, but the other functions. If the person that you're talking to doesn't qualify you in the beginning stages of the conversation to understand what you're trying to buy, what are you trying to hire, and they just keep talking and just keep telling, to me, that interview usually has a long uphill from there because the person doesn't know what I'm shopping for. So if they don't ask a question, I'd view that as a little bit of a red flag. Marketers need to be curious.
And I look for people, I try to look outside the box. Oftentimes when we hire for somebody, we want to check all the boxes. Have they done X? Do they have this skill set? Have they gone to this type of school or whatnot? But marketing is changing dramatically. And as Folia mentioned, it's very broad. So I look for people who can think outside the box and who can also take a step up and look outside maybe their particular marketing function and how what they're doing is going to impact the overall go-to-market strategy. Because there are always trade-offs in marketing, always. And so does that person who's maybe only running online understand how their role or what they're doing will impact the sales funnel? Or how will it impact the products that we bring to market? And how do we think about that as a whole and not just about our specific function? And so it's finding people who can think outside the box and not specifically about just one thing.
And in the first 1 to 10 million in revenue, if you think about like the priority of adding different kinds of marketing talent to your team, what's number one, what's number two in terms of lead gen or branding or product marketing?
I love product marketing as an early hire, and I think it's because when you get to do branding and you get to do a lot of these things, you really have to have a fundamental reason why. And if you're not connected deeply to the customer's problem, the thing they're trying to do, and to the way that your solution actually solves that, then your branding can get empty really fast. And so you have to really start with a deep level of empathy, and I think product marketing is a really foundational kind of a place to put it.
Yeah, I'm building on your why, right? That's the pattern recognition early that informs all the what's next, what ads, what brand, what message, what sales tool, what competitive angle. And so someone usually it's the founder starting, right? That's figuring out that product market fit, but then the product marketer has to step in between engineering and the other marketing functions that are coming and deliver that why that people can replicate.
Yeah, I also like product marketing, and that's my background too, and I probably have a bias because you can help the team early, it's the salespeople, and just get the deals on the table, but you also can scale the sales team as the company grows. On the other hand, I would say, what are you trying to do? What company are you trying to build? Because that's going to influence what's more important. If you're building an SMB brand, then demand gen and accelerating that is very important. If you're going for enterprise, absolutely, product marketing would be the first hire. So I think it depends on what market you're going after.
I think the one thing to watch out for, especially in the type of business that you have, a lot of people go out and hire demand first. But if your company is not prepared, if the product is not ready for that demand, or if you have a direct sales channel or partners, if you're not ready to execute on that, from a marketing perspective, the worst thing that we can do is spend resources to get somebody to the top of the funnel and the company's not ready to execute on it, because you may only have that one touch point ever in the life cycle of the brand or the company. So think wisely about kind of the order and where you are at with your organization and if you're ready to execute across those different pieces.
In talking about branding, does PR matter anymore at all? Should you be spending any money on this? What should you be looking at when you think about brand building?
In my world, I'm in a very deep industry function, and so for us, PR is very, very important. And when I started my role, we had very little PR, and that was the first piece that I built in. I think it's important to have the market tell the story for you, and that's both for just getting that validation, just generally speaking, obviously it helps with the buzz, but it helps with also your employees and your staff and really feeling good and proud about what they're doing. And PR is just such a great way as well to connect with your customers and connect with their story. And it gets that other validation, that proof point in the marketplace, whether it's a reporter and connecting that with your customers, really can come full circle, especially with a product organization. So I've used PR as well to really kind of build those bridges with the product teams as well.
Yeah, especially in a vertical-oriented business where you've got customers who know each other, there's relationships, they trust each other.
Yeah, PR might not be a great name for it anymore either.
That's what I was going to say.
It's you know, I actually started in PR, and I remember we used to get like 5 networking magazines alone every week. You know, and every industry had 5 or 6 magazines, so you had this really, you know, active available channel. And I think it's probably more appropriately labeled as influencer relations or something like that. Because when I look at what our PR team does on a day-to-day basis, it's a very small slice of it is with what we would have thought of as media in the old days.
I think people that do PR are storytellers, and I think storytelling is relevant. It's just that the channels that we do that through are no longer just press releases or magazines. It's blogs, it's podcasts, it's events like this. So our PR function is really spanning all of that today.
Storytelling and narrative is a really interesting piece of the equation that I think companies really, it takes them a long time to get right. You know, why they fit in a customer's life, where that pops up, what kind of customer can help tell them that story. All those things are really a core asset that you have to constantly be thinking about. What's the narrative we're telling the market, and how can they help us deepen that storyline?
Right. And for Sean and for Robson, you're selling to a technical audience, developers or folks running infrastructure. They're pretty hard-nosed sometimes in how they receive marketing messaging. What do you do differently for that kind of audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good one, right? Developers have a very, very good bullshit atmosphere, right? It's an ozone layer that rejects advertising and rejects marketing messages, and that comes down to your product marketer understanding how they communicate and where and in what form. And so you don't let a copywriter from a consumer space talk to a developer. So I think that's a key part of it. You're also looking at different channels. And lastly, I guess the point I want to make is PR is not about TechCrunch. Like, scoring TechCrunch points is great, it feels good, but you should be aiming for a way bigger point of view than company gets Series B, right? Why did you get a Series B? What's the actual problem in the world that's bigger than you? And tell that story to the business press. And if you can execute that transition, a lot of traffic's going to come to your website that you should measure. You know, are you getting more direct traffic, more organic traffic? And now you can start to see business results. So,
yeah, I think that organic traffic is 100% of our focus from a technical audience perspective. And I think the ways to do that are, you're totally right. You can't bring in a consumer kind of a marketer and put them in place to try to talk to a technology-driven kind of a buyer. And so we're doing a lot of converting of engineers, engineering managers into marketing roles because they have a much more sort of authentic storyline to tell. And we actually, I think our whole process is, we know a lot about how our product works, we know a lot about what the customers are trying to do with it, and so we have to just turn the company inside out and make as much of our content marketing, manuals and how-tos and thoughts about how to actually do the work, and that becomes a really effective lead gen channel.
So we'll do one more question, then we'll go to the audience. Where does customer marketing sit in your list of priorities? So thinking about reaching folks who are already on their post kind of the conversion funnel, they're using the product, you have a relationship. How do you use marketing to improve retention and expansion?
So I just want to share a story about that because my current company, we didn't have anybody doing customer marketing, and that was a priority for me. I've seen it add tremendous value because nothing sells your product like other customers telling your story. So I brought in somebody I trusted to do that. And in 4 months, she's taken us from really not too many enterprise level stories to 40 stories that I can share with my field and internally. It's actually absolutely transforming my marketing. So I think it's a super top priority.
Can I argue with you because it's fun?
Yeah.
All right. We all have a certain number of bullets or whatever calories, however we want to describe it, that we can spend in the market. I really, really value acquiring new users, starting new teams, much, much more than I do my existing ones. And so if I could conserve my calories acquiring new customers and use all of my marketing on that, then I turn to my product team because we're building SaaS products. I know who you are. I know what buttons you're clicking or not clicking, and so I should use in-product messaging. I should use tutorials or guides in the product because I don't have to pay for that. I have it. And so make sure that your product team is thinking about how they can do customer marketing in the place where the customer is so that you can hunt more new customers with that marketing budget.
So, I think it's how do you define customer marketing? So you're defining it as keeping in touch with the customer, educating them, which I think is very important. But there's also turning customers into advocates, into fans, and that's the piece that I'm focused on as a marketer right now.
So you caught me in a little bit of a lie. If you're driving around, there's billboards with Jira customers on them, and that's exactly what we did. We asked customers, tell us about your team, and if they're awesome, we'll put them on a billboard. So both matter.
There you go, both matter.
I think that's the biggest challenge though for organizations, at least that's what I've experienced, is where does customer marketing, however you define that, where does it fit? Does it fit in the sales organization? Does it fit in marketing? We talk about this full customer journey, full life cycle. Does it fit in the product org with the growth part of the business that's doing all that in-product touches? So where does customer marketing fit for you? I think that's an individual question, but I think a lot of companies think about it maybe a little too late. And whether you invest a lot of dollars or a certain amount of people resources to thinking about that customer, it can add tremendous amount on the back end. If you think about the numbers in your business, if you can increase that lifetime value of that customer by 1 point, or they are that advocate and they bring somebody to the top of the funnel, or maybe speed up the sales cycle because now you've got the right references there. It's hard to measure it sometimes, but I think it can have tremendous impact on the overall bottom line of the business.
I think so. Seeing a couple of pre-scaled SaaS companies over the last 5 or 6 years, one of the things that tends to happen is you get this graduating class phenomenon inside your customer base. So the day they bought it, that's what they think it does. And in general, you have to keep moving people along really quickly. And so whether you do that in product through growth tactics and through a really sort of product-driven approach through customer stories, you have to really be cognizant about the fact that their knowledge level generally is frozen on the day that they bought it. And so you have to pull them along with you.
Great. Well, let's go to the audience for some Q&A. We have a couple runners with microphones, so just raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. So in the back here.
Hi there, my name is Ankur Srivastava with Swarm Sales. My first question is, Forrester is predicting that by 2028, there'll be about 1 million new companies that will be born in the cloud. So that means starting this year, that number is about 100,000. Starting this year, 246 new companies will be born in the cloud every single day for the next 10 years. So if the traditional channels, as you mentioned, Sean, that they're kind of bogged down, does it mean everybody is going down the same lanes, or are we now starting to create different lanes to essentially start reaching out to those end clients and driving more branding and awareness?
I'll try to give a simple answer on it. I think scarcity drives innovation, right? So as the channels get crowded, new channels will emerge. But I think the thing that folks in this room and myself, as I looked at starting a company, ran into was you can start a company pretty easy. You can start with Amazon credits. You can start coding in your room. And that used to be really hard. And so now there's more people competing for the same amount of attention. And so find new channels and expose those before everyone else does. The PR angle, you have to have a point of view because everyone's competing for your ears. So I think this attention economy forces you to think about that message, the differentiation, and the channels. Because one thing people always forget about, do we have product? Yes. Do we have marketing? Yes. Distribution is king. If you can't get it out and reach the people, then nothing you've done matters.
I think partnerships are becoming, and alliances are becoming more important than they ever have been. That's what I'm seeing, because the customers are overwhelmed. There's so much choice. So they're looking for trusted advisors. They're looking for us to bring together solutions with other products and not just be that one solution that then they have to integrate themselves.
I'd add cross-channel integration. I think that's the thing, is as you hire and build marketing teams, you're going to end up with lots of specialists who are channel-driven specialists, and they'll want to optimize their channel. And you have to cross them over to make sure they're working together, because that invariably is going to make the investment across those different channels a lot more valuable.
Great. Let's go to the next question.
Vikas Bambry with Customer. Where in the 1 to 100 journey do you really kind of put your foot on the gas from a branding perspective? I look back at TALKDESK as an example. I thought one of the great things that you guys did was the billboards around Dreamforce with get your contact center up and running in 5 minutes, something to that effect. Where were you? I can't remember where you guys were in your journey when you made that investment, but it had an extreme impact. I was at 8x8 at the time, and we were like, "Wow, who's that?" But yeah, just interested, where in the 1 to 100 million journey do you really kind of put your foot on the branding spend?
So since you brought up TALKDESK, I should respond to that, right? You know, I think our CEO is very interested in, believes in marketing, and that's a bit unusual in my experience, but that's really fueled the growth of the company. I do think you need to have, and he had a working product and some customers before you take out the billboard, because I think to your point, you can create a lot of the top of funnel interest, and I've been in companies that do that, and then the deals don't close. But if you can close those deals, I think getting your brand out early is tremendous, and it has worked for TALKDESK.
Maybe a couple tactical things on that. You know, that journey, right, from someone seeing your message to going to your website. You want to have all those systems functioning so that you don't have to recapture that demand, because it'll be twice as expensive to get their attention the second time. And the last piece is just make sure your product is ready. And by product, I also mean your support team, because nothing kills an immature product better than a ton of marketing, because you're bringing in people that have that experience. And this is a mistake that just keeps getting repeated, where enthusiasm abounds, and you bring a ton of people in and they have a bad experience, and it's really hard to recover from that.
Yeah, I think what that branding's going to do for you is the other big question you got to ask. I mean, at Concur, I think we were north of 500 million in revenue before we made any real significant investments in brand, and it was because it didn't with the buying community we had. We had other ways to reach them, and so we could do it in a much more efficient way. And so I think there's a lot of, it's fun to see your company's name on a billboard on the 101, and that's it's as much an internal asset, I think, around here as anything. It makes you feel more real to your employees, but I think you be careful to do it for the right reasons, you know, along the way.
I think it also goes back to, are you building an SMB or an enterprise brand? Because SMB is like consumer marketing. You're trying to reach a broad swath of buyers, and they can be everywhere. And so you do a lot of branding. If it's an enterprise and you're more targeted, then that's a waste of money.
So the only thing I would say, enterprises are people too. That's the thing I think you got to be super careful about. That sooner or later, as your product gets more successful and the bill gets bigger, your customer is going to walk into the CFO's office with a multi-million-dollar PO from your company. If the CFO says, who? We're going to give him what?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Agreed.
You have to have a brand that extends beyond your core market if you have ambitions to grow in a significant way.
At some point, I just think it's a little later, maybe, like you were saying.
And I would just, last point, coming back to the product marketing piece, before you buy that billboard and you work on your brand, think about your position. You know, when you put that billboard up, and somebody hasn't seen your brand before, do they know what you do? When they see that billboard, do they understand functionally, like what is it that your company does, or who are you? And I've seen a lot of companies put up that big billboard with a big brand, and it looks nice, but you have no idea what problem they're trying to solve or who they're actually targeting. So just be mindful of that if you're going to make that big investment to drive that interest.
All right, next question, please.
My name is Dan. I'm with a company called PandaDoc. What's your favorite growth tactic?
Favorite?
It's a stumper, wow.
So I'll go 100% organic content. I think you got to know what your buyer's doing, what problem they're trying to solve right now. They're going to hit the search bar in Google and they're going to say, I need to do X. And if you don't own every one of those topics in a super deep way, you're going to end up wasting your money on some other channel trying to buy leads. The most effective leads are companies or people who are trying to solve a problem they've got, authentically a problem they've got, not somebody who you've found through some creative ad that's moving fast on their screen or following them around. You got to really be in their life with them. That's what I'd say.
I'm going to double down on content and add web optimization to that. Just because if you get them to come to your site, it has to be easy for them to then request a demo or engage with you somehow.
I would say for me, it's account-based marketing and intent marketing based off of the market that we are in, which is very much upmarket. Being very, very focused. I'm much better off focusing on a certain set of customers and certain messages and certain channels. I can be a lot more effective that way in driving the growth.
I think one, I'll just speak maybe from the Atlassian playbook that I was talking about with PandaDoc this morning is we took a couple of zeros off our price in exchange for moving those over to distribution. So if it's cheaper, more people can buy it with fewer approvals. which means more people are using it. And because the marginal cost of software is so low, you're getting distribution early, and then you have pricing levers that you can apply over time. And so maybe think carefully about your pricing. Does it make for a fast transaction, or does 3 people's bosses need to approve it? And that might be a growth lever that you can look at.
We have time for a couple more questions from the audience. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, this is Ash from Zendesk. I would love to hear your perspective on some of the earlier discussions we had today of this CRO role and how is that changing, the metrics and how you communicate with sales in other parts of the company as well.
I think the CRO role is very, very interesting because I think the CRO role and the CMO role are very blended, actually. Because there's actually one revenue number that a company reports, right? There's one revenue number. There's not separate revenue numbers. And frankly, everybody should be thinking about the customer experience and getting the right product and the right value to the customer at the right time. So it's kind of interesting to hear that a lot of times the CRO role is often mentioned in a sales conversation, but really, in fact, I think it belongs in the marketing conversation. If you really think about that whole, the whole life cycle, when we're talking about the customer journey, who's thinking the most about all the different customer touch points? Where does that really belong in the organization? But I think it's an interesting topic, and it's interesting that acronym pops up a lot here in North America. In other parts of the world, you'll hear things like Chief Commercial Officer, because other parts of the world are really thinking about, too, like how do you build out the fundamentals of your go-to-market? How do you balance the revenue and the cost? Your CAC to LTV and those type of things. So definitely hearing it in many different parts of the world as well, but using kind of different vernacular.
I think CRO is a really aligning concept. I think it's, in general, you have to have a great partnership with the head of sales to begin with to be successful in marketing. And so with this organizational sort of lean into having that be a kind of sales-driven role, I think is really smart for companies. And it does force everyone to be thinking about revenue. And I think that's something that marketers sometimes can be resistant to be getting too close to sales, and I think that's a real mistake. I think you have to do the opposite. You have to get as close to sales as possible.
I agree.
It's a great side effect from CRO is customer success is embedded in it, because you make some money on new deals and you make some money on renewals and you lose money on churn. And so if that person is thinking end to end, they are really going to drive the notion of customer success through the organization to get stuff fixed. Whereas even as a marketer, if I'm just focused on landing the new thing, I put the blinders on a little bit and I don't think about the next step. But CRO gives you that expansive view of the customer success that I think is a great side effect.
Great. Well, we'll wrap up with a final question here. And we were talking about this as a panel in the back, which is, how do you think about defending your marketing budget? And Robson said, oh, no, it's not about defending your budget.
I feel like the question's backwards.
But attacking your budget.
Yeah, I think you have to be attacking your budget all the time, because I think it's your job, particularly in a growth company, to disconnect the growth of the marketing budget from the growth of the company, or else you'll eat the whole pie. And there is sort of, I know, Sean, there is this mythical, what if we could acquire customers at this super efficient rate forever? But I've heard marketers say that forever, and it just is never true. So finding ways to build leverage into your model progressively in that 1 to 100 phase is just critical.
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing that SEO work, I totally agree with you, right? SEO is an investment that keeps paying. So I agree with you there. The place I would say that, just to take the counterpoint here, is if you can acquire customers at a price that you're willing to pay that's below your lifetime value, maybe the focus would be how many can we get, not how efficient can we get. And I've seen this play out in places I've worked where there's an obsession metric like cost per eval. And a lot of the brain power goes into that metric, ignoring the fact that for an incrementally larger spend, you could get a lot more customers right now. And so how fast is your market growing and how fast do you want to go after it is the flip side, which is put your foot on the gas, and it depends where you are as a company.
Mm-hmm. In the end, it's about driving value, right? We're all trying to get value and drive growth based on the cost. So I don't look at it as defending the budget. I look at it as having a strategy and constantly optimizing the budget.
And I think it's about having the conversation around, what is your philosophy in marketing? Do you want to spend and make those investments in brand? If so, everybody at the executive level and the board has to be bought into where you're going to make those investments and where you're at in your life cycle of your company. There may be times that you're really trying to drive the efficiency, but sometimes it's better just to really focus on those core key customers or corporate goals that you want to accomplish, and making sure that everybody across the business is aligned on what those metrics are. because brand and marketing can be very difficult to measure. Some of the online things you can measure, but we were talking earlier about PR. When you run some PR, you get some great mentions, and you're having that right story in marketplace. If you have a huge spike to your website visit, do companies measure that? How important is that measurement? So I think it's important to think about what you're really trying to accomplish and align those goals, and it will change and iterate over time.
Great. Well, please join me in thanking our panelists for a very interesting discussion. Thanks a lot.